ground floor.
Let's try again. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Ground Floor Podcast. My name is JC Steyn. I'm here today with Kwena Moloto. Kwena, for the second time, how are you doing?
No, doing brilliantly, and for the second time, it's good to be back.
Yes, for the second time is because we had just gotten started on this podcast, just getting into our riveting conversation, and then my housekeeper came in to ask if she could use the extension that I'm currently using to charge the equipment. The answer was no. So we're starting again. Okay, so anyway, we were talking about last time. So last time I had Kwena on the podcast, we were in his place in Pretoria. It was election time in the US, so we were busy glancing at the TV every now and again to see who was winning and so on. And it was just a good time. Remember, I pitched the panel government to you.
Yes, I'll never forget the panel government.
The panel government still stands. I explained it to someone else again after that. I can't remember who I explained it to. But on the podcast, I explained the panel government. I gave it a bit more meat, a bit more of an explanation that time. And it was just a good time. Maybe we'll talk about the panel government again.
I was about to say, I think this podcast is actually just your way of advertising the panel government.
That's all it is.
Once in a while, you bring in political people, and then you say, "Okay, look, I've rethought some things about the panel government."
I'll change this to the panel government podcast, and then we'll just have people on specifically to discuss the panel government.
Yeah, no. I'm behind this.
I'm behind it too. I think it's a great idea. Okay, so anyway. So Kwena, please tell the people who don't know you, because there's a lot of people who listen to this podcast at Tux who have never heard of you in their life.
I don't think that's possible.
Is that so? Sorry, guys. Kwena's a celebrity. Please do tell them who you are and what you're all about and why you think you're here today.
I have 3,000 Instagram followers. I'm famous. But no, for those who don't know me, I'm Kwena. I was SRC President at UP in 2017, 2018. I'm also a councillor in the city of Tshwane, and I'm also chairperson of the Democratic Alliance Student Organization on a national level. So born and bred politician,
yes.
and here.
Very impressive. Yes. So I'm very lucky to have Kwena as my friend. I really enjoy having you as someone I can message and call upon with regards to political issues and that sort of stuff, because you have a different perspective. You have a better perspective than I do, from where I'm sitting. So the reason why Kwena is here today is to talk a little bit about the student protest that's been going on over the past few days. So for those of you that don't know, what's been happening is basically as follows. So we've gone into the new academic year for 2021, and we've had a lot of students complaining that they are not allowed to register. Now, these are, how did you say the name earlier? NSFAS.
Yeah, NSFAS.
Yes.
I believe in that extra A.
Yes. Kwena, when he says NSFAS, he adds an A somewhere in there to make it sound more like a word. It is not, in fact, NSFAS, as I've been saying to people for the past week. It's NSFAS, apparently. So anyway, NSFAS is the organization in South Africa that funds students to study and gives them, cash to pay for their residence, to pay for their modules, textbooks, the whole thing. And what's the actual arrangement with NSFAS? So it's a loan, right? It doesn't need to be paid back, or is it a grant?
No, it's been changed to I think they call it a bursary, so it doesn't need to be paid back.
Okay, that's fantastic. That's really nice. Okay, so it's sort of like a grant. It's a bursary where you get paid so long as you qualify to study at a university. If you do not have the financial means to pay for it, NSFAS will pay for it for you. And that's sort of our way of making sure that no matter what your background is, you can still study. However, things are not as rosy as they would sound. Because over the past few days, especially, there's been a big uproar of students who have not been able to register for their NSFAS fees, and for universities, for that matter, because they have outstanding debt. So how does that work? Because if they're on NSFAS already, where's this debt coming from?
So there are two different groups there. There's NSFAS students that aren't being funded by government because of a shortfall in the budget. When it comes to historical debt, that's what we refer to as the missing middle students. So that's students that don't qualify for NSFAS, but also aren't in a position where they can actually afford higher education.
Okay.
And so it's generally the missing middle students who aren't getting any funding that build up historical
Okay, so
debt.
that's where the problem's coming from. Students who either feel they should get funding or who are supposed to get funding are not getting funding. And as a result of the fact that they don't have funding, they cannot go study at a university. They can't register on their student portals. They've got financial holds and blocks and all this sort of stuff. So it's become a bit of a real issue. So there've been protests at a lot of universities over the past week. I just saw now, just before we were recording, that Tux has some protesting happening right outside of campus and some on campus I saw as well, which is, if we were not in an age right now where all classes were online, it would be a really big disruptive issue. But as it is, it hasn't really affected the student life of 95% of students as much just yet, but it is happening, and someone has died from these protests. Tell me, I saw someone post about it, they called it police brutality. Can you sort of tell the people a little bit about what actually happened?
So essentially what happened, there were protests at WITS, South African Police Service showed up, and there was a former master's student. He was actually just leaving the clinic. He wasn't actually physically a part of the process. The police opened fire, and I believe that, I think the investigation's going on, but that live ammunition was used, and the former student died. It was quite sad. He had a wife, 2 children, and I think that's a lot of the reason that there's such outrage inside the higher education space at the moment.
Yeah, it's awful. It's always terrible when you see protests that need not be violent, become a situation where people's lives are at stake. And this guy has now obviously died if they used live ammunition. But as soon as you use live ammunition, you are putting everyone's lives at stake all of a sudden, because you've now escalated this protest to a whole other level of, really serious bloodshed and violence. So anyway, I want to sort of get to the demands. So there's been this list that's been published for student, demands. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'll put the list up on the screen right now. And some of the demands are a little bit ridiculous. Like, some of them are sort of inachievable, completely unachievable, and just not it's not things we can do as a country. So, for example, one of the demands is that we need to increase student quotas. So what that means is that we need to allow more students to register at universities. Now, Kwena, you studied at Tux. You remember what classes look like first year, first semester. So I got an interesting message this morning from someone who's studying engineering. And what they told me was the problem with increasing the amount of students allowed at a university that is already at capacity is that it now encourages the university, or gives them incentive, to try and make students fail so that they drop out. Okay, so I'll give you an example. I don't know if you've ever taken one of those orientation booklets that the first years get when they join.
I should have as president, but
Yeah,
I don't think I did.
So, so if you pick up one of those booklets, something you'll notice, which I found quite interesting, I noticed this on the first day, is if you look at the venues allocated to classes, because in that booklet they give you your classes for the whole year. If you look at the venues for first semester, the venues are about, let's say, 30% all the way to, in some cases, double as large in capacity in first semester as they are in second semester. So just practically, for first semester, let's say a class I took in first year was EKN 110. So they would, let's say they have 3 different groups that all use tutor, or let's say 6 different groups. By the time second semester venues are allocated, there's only 3 groups left. Okay, so what you can see from this is that they have a number. They have an expectation. How many students are we expecting to drop out between now and the end of the year? And obviously, there will always be people who drop out. I knew a bunch of people who I became friends with within the first few weeks who were not there by the end of the semester, let alone the end of the year. And when you have friends who drop out, suddenly that number makes sense. Because the university can't bring in the amount of people in January that they can actually hold. Because then by the end of the year, half the classes are going to be empty. So they need to bring in way more people than they can actually hold at first, hoping, I'm saying now in quotation marks, that many of them, or expecting is probably the better word, that many of them will drop out. So if you were to increase student quotas and allow more people in, I don't know what the situation looks like at other universities, but if they look anything like Tuks, they are at capacity right now, which means if we increase it by 30%, let's say, we are already our Jan intake is already 30% more than what it is. If we increase that, now we're looking at, nearing on double what it's supposed to be. So by the time that initial shed of students is left or has left, we still don't have enough space in the venues, which is a big problem because now, we sort of all accept the fact that first year students are going to be sitting on the floor sometimes. But if you have a second year student sitting on the floor, someone's going to have a problem, So we can't really have that happening. So that's the first thing which I thought was a little bit unreasonable. The second thing we moved that was on the list was a complete return of students to campus under phase 1, which personally, I've sort of always been an advocate for at least some level of lockdown, just because the numbers are very much available to us. Like you can go on the internet, I don't know if I'm saying this right, but it's like worldometers or worldometers or whatever .com, and they have the coronavirus numbers. It's updated every day for every country. You can see what things are looking like. So you can very clearly on the graph see first wave was pretty bad, second wave was worse. If we're going to hit a third wave, we're not being vaccinated right now. It's going to be really, really bad. So I think, for all intents and purposes, anyone who can stay home should stay home. So that was the second thing, which I suppose you can say is not an unreasonable request. I just think it's a bad idea. And then the third and perhaps the craziest request of all is that universities should be free, like now. I think the UP education page posted something like their demands actually said we need decolonized, free, quality education, and then they put in capital letters, now, today, we want it immediately. So, obviously we could go on and on as to why South Africa is not in an economic position to do that at the moment. And then there was just one more thing that I want to mention that was on the demands list, which was, in essence, it came down to students being paid to study. So it wasn't worded that bluntly, but basically what was said was that students should be paid an allowance every month for food and that kind of stuff. So, in essence, you are receiving money because you are a student. And that could now be flipped to the other side where they say, okay, instead of giving students 1,000 Rand a month, why don't we just take 1,000 Rand per month off of their fees or whatever? But both of them, in essence, have the same result, which is that the university has less money to play with and to use to improve facilities and keep themselves running and so on. So, Kwena Moloto, you're a big man in the political space. Student culture is something you've been immersed in for the past, I'm sure, as long as you can remember at this point.
5-6 years.
So, Kwena was SRC President at Tuks. He knows what that looks like. He knows what it feels like to deal with student issues. He's been working heavily with the DA. He knows what it's like to go on ENCA and give comment about political issues. He knows what it's like to sit in a debate across from a different political party and try and argue your points. And he knows what it's like to walk in front of a protest. So, Kwena, talk to me about this. What are your thoughts?
Sure. I'm going to try and go through the 4 points that you raised. So the first one was the increase in capacity, I believe you said. And look, you're not wrong. At UP, as an example, you've got first year sitting on the floor. You go to universities like University of Venda, you have 4 or 5 students sharing a room. So the infrastructure we have at institutions of higher learning, without a doubt, don't capacitate any significant growth inside the student population. That being said, though, where I think things could be interesting is the shift to online. I think that COVID showed us that online is possible inside the higher education space, and I think for some students you could find that they actually enjoyed it more than on-campus learning. And so I think if there was ever going to be in the immediate future scope for massive growth, I think that an interesting thing to look at would be the use of the online systems. The second point was, I prepared the first point, and I was like, okay, the second point will come to me.
I want to ask a question with regards to the first point. So I'm actually, something I was thinking about when I first started in university in first year was, what if the university had, a certain student population, let's say 60% of their students were contact students, and then the remaining 40% were people from all around the world who are getting their degree completely online. And that sounds fantastic. I think it's definitely something we can look to in the future. There's just one little issue, which is exams. Because an online exam, unfortunately, like it is the way it is, it's never going to have the same level of integrity as an on-campus exam. Did I say online the first time? An online exam, never going to have the same integrity as an on-campus exam. So, I mean, you've already seen... my girlfriend Tasita, she works right now. She's doing 2 months. She's teaching French to 8th graders at St. Andrew's Girls' School, which is just here in the area. And she's got 1 or 2 students who are currently stuck overseas right now. So there's this one girl she was telling me about who's stuck in China. She can't get here because of COVID, and she's still, for all intents and purposes, she's still going to St. Andrews. She's got all her classes every day. They're completely live streamed for her, which is very much possible for a university. But when she has to write a test, someone individually has to monitor her. So she has to put her camera on, and someone has to sit and watch this girl take her test for an hour or whatever. And as a temporary measure for one student, it works out, right? But if we're talking about a university like Tux, which has 60,000 students as of now, let's say we were to increase that quota to 100,000 and say, okay, we allow 60,000 on campus and we allow 40,000 or, whatever amount, but let's keep it at 40 for now, online, we have a big problem. Because how do you invigilate, how do you make sure that someone is not cheating through a camera? Because I can think off the top of my head of like 7 different ways I would cheat if I were a first year taking an exam I wasn't prepared for.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of memes on
those.
Yeah,
I mean, there's a billion ways you can work around it. You can take a video of yourself writing and just loop it, and then go off and grab a book, or you can have your notes right around the camera or behind the camera, so that
on the screen there,
it looks like you're just looking at the camera, but you're looking at your answers. You can probably switch out your paper without anyone noticing, because if the paper's flat on the table, someone looking through a camera isn't going to see what's on that paper. You can probably switch it out. There's a billion things you can do. You can have things in your ears. You can have people telling you things. You can mute your audio, or you can make it look like your audio isn't muted, but you can just quickly disconnect the sound or whatever. There's a billion things that can happen. So, how do you get past that, do you reckon?
No, I think it's quite easy. I mean, there are models for it. You look at UNISA. It's almost entirely distant learning.
The key word there being almost, because they still do write exams in halls.
Yeah, no, exactly, and I think that would be possible even if you increased taxes capacity to 40%, that are now doing online, because you could have tests and exams happening in the evenings, so when there are no classes and suddenly you have all of the space available, and also the way tax does it is that they space test, so it's not that everyone's writing on the same day. You've got EKN 120s writing today, EKN 220s writing tomorrow, and then that allows for them to utilize their space. And so I think with tests and exams, to me that would be the easiest solution. I think the more difficult solution would obviously be the fact that there are so many South Africans that don't have access to laptops, don't have access to high quality Wi-Fi, and don't have at home decent study space. And so for me that would be the more difficult aspect. But I mean, I guess you could have a situation where those that can do online effectively do online, and then those that don't are on campus. Then I think the second point, well, actually, I'll just jump to random points. I don't think I'll be able to remember going point by point on what you raised. I think the free higher education, look, it's a very complex issue, because obviously President Zuma announced free higher education
a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and obviously it was politically motivated. They were going into the ANC National Congress. And Zuma wanted to ensure that Dlamini Zuma won, and so there was this bold statement, and he also knew he wouldn't need to implement it. The reality is, the concept, there's no such thing as free higher education. It's just like there's nothing for free. In fact, it's like Facebook isn't
higher
free.
Education paid for through tax. That's what the real thing is.
Yeah, regardless of what it is, it will never be free. So then the question becomes, who foots the bill? And I think that's not something that when that announcement was made, that any real engagement was had as to say, how are we going to fund this free higher education, and I think that look, there's a lot of organizations that have released various models, but I think sustainably the question for me is more, how do we ensure that students that can't afford to pay don't pay, and on I mean, from my point of view, it would be a loan system, and that's also my party's point of view, is that while you're studying, sign an acknowledgement of debt form, that, okay, over the course of your academic career, whatever, 200,000, 300,000 that you've accumulated as debt. And then once someone graduates, because that's another big issue, is that people, they finish their degrees, but they don't have access to their degrees because they've got historical debt, and universities say, we're not handing you over this piece of paper until you pay us what you owe us.
Yeah, but it's their insurance policy.
But the issue is that how is someone supposed to cover 300,000 rand debt if they can't enter the workplace because they don't have a degree, No,
I get you.
And so the way that as a DA we've envisioned it is to say that, look, it's an acknowledgement of debt, and that once a student gets a job and starts earning over a certain threshold, that SARS takes funds back directly, and that over time could become a self-sustaining system. But I think the reality is we do need to think about how do we ensure that any deserving student, academically deserving student, isn't held back simply because of their financial situation. In regards to the shutdown, it's a difficult one as well. I think the whole situation is a difficult one, but I mean, there's a lot of students that can't register. I mean, you and me had been speaking before to say that, look at tax. It's about 10% of students on NSFAS, but there are other institutions where there are a lot more, and across the country, in terms of the new applicants.
Yeah, tell them about TUT, because I was shocked. Kwena told me this in the car. So at the University of Pretoria, we're looking at about 10% of students on NSFAS, or at least the statistic that I saw was about, I could be wrong about this, but it said something like 5,885, that's the number that comes to mind, is, these are the people who are at risk to not be able to register. So if we assume that those are the people on NSFAS, that's about 10% of our total student population, a little bit less, probably like 9%. Kwena tells me, TUT, we're looking at like 99% of the people there are on NSFAS. So whereas at TUX, if NSFAS people suddenly can't get back to campus, it's a chunk. At TUT, that's everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the difficulty, and I suspect that a lot of people watching this will be TUX students, and so the sort of paradigm is different. But I mean, across the country, because of failure of NSFAS to provide funds, there's about 730,000 students that aren't going to be able to register, and I mean that's 3/4 of 1,000,000 students that won't be able to register in the academic year starting. And so I mean, as the DA, we've always been against any form of illegal or violent protest, but I do think that the academic year should, or let's say the commencement of the academic year should be pushed back by a week or two, because I think that there needs to be pressure on the Minister of Higher Education to get this issue sorted. And it would be a travesty, inside my opinion, for 3/4 of 1,000,000 students to be forced to play catch up for the foreseeable future. And when you speak about those students, it's the same students that aren't coming from affluent backgrounds. It's students that already, when they enter that space, have a whole list of challenges in front of them that a student like me, for example, hasn't had. I've always had 3 meals a day, unless by choice I decide not to. I've always had a roof over my head, and when I was SRC President, we saw it a lot. Where students would be sleeping in the library, where students would be sleeping inside toilets, and it's those students that are the same students that would be being forced to play catch up if this issue isn't sorted as a matter of urgency. And so it would be my belief that we push the commencement of the academic year up by just 2 weeks.
So what is this problem sorted out? Like, what's the perfect solution? Like, when will you be able to say to yourself as Kwena, this problem is handled?
So for me, you listed a whole bunch of things, and South African Union of Students has listed a whole bunch of things. The various SRCs have listed things. For me, the immediate issue that needs to be sorted out is the question of these 730,000 students. And for me, the solution to that is to say that while the other issues are engaged on, and while we look for sustainable ways to actually deal with the funding crisis that we have in the higher education system, that those students be allowed to register. And it's my belief, the Minister of Higher Education has been in talks. I suspect that man is not sleeping. I hope he's not sleeping. And I suspect that a resolution will be found for the short-term issues over the next week to 2 weeks. But the reality is that I've been I was at UP for a long time. I didn't fly, I didn't fly. I was there for about 6 years, for a 3-year degree. But it's because of student politics. I loved it. But since my second year at varsity, Fees Must Fall has been a thing, and you're now talking about 5 years later, and there are still protests, and so I think that we really do need to sit down and figure out a sustainable model so that we can continue with academics and not consistently find ourselves in the same situation where campuses are being shut down, where students are going hungry. Like, we just need a sustainable model, and I hope that this year we can we can crack it.
Yeah. So obviously, if you look at like a perfect utopian country.
With a panel government.
With a panel government, of course. Kwena, I've been meaning to say this. If panel government existed, this would not be a problem. Like, if the panel government was a thing, we would not even be sitting here right now.
Yeah.
The panel government would have taken care of this like that.
Just
it
like
would have been like
one
it
time.
would have been one meeting, and we would have been sorted. So we'll talk. You know what? Later, for the people watching, we'll explain the panel government later again. We'll go through it again. We'll explain it, and then when the panel government becomes a real thing, then you can look back at this podcast and say, "Wow, these two forward-thinking gentlemen have had such a great idea." But okay, so anyway, if you look at a perfect society, so let's look at societies that are as close to perfect as possible, which for me, I mean, I know this is like the old stereotype, but the Scandinavian countries really got it going on.
They get it right.
They get it right. They're like the Scandinavian countries, so we're talking about Finland, we're talking about Denmark, we're talking about Sweden, we're talking about Switzerland, Norway. Those countries, they got this in the bag, So things like this doesn't happen. They have free higher education as well. So like when I said, nothing's really free. It's paid for by taxpayers. Their tax rates are really reasonable and really good. They have free public health care. They have free everything. And it just works perfectly. It's this perfect blend between capitalism and socialism, and everything just works. So if you look at a country like that, obviously every country has the potential to be like that should things be managed properly. So where do you think the problem is for us? Like where's the issue coming from? Where's the speed bump that's keeping us from developing to a country where something like 750,000 students not being able to register is just not a problem?
Look, I think the first issue is that we don't have a panel government.
I think so
said.
too. I think that's the main issue for any
that's
country
the main issue, yeah, but
on the planet.
but
Okay,
just-
talk. I'm going to close these windows because I can hear the hardy does every 5 seconds. But you talk as if I'm still here.
Okay.
So just tell me about your solution. I'm going to be listening. Go
No,
ahead.
it's perfect. So look, I think there are various issues. Obviously, big one is mismanagement of funds inside South Africa. When I was on ENCA on Sunday, I mentioned, since 1994, we've spent 57 billion rand bailing out Eskom. SAA. We've spent, in fact, hundreds of billions bailing out Eskom, and so there's obviously just a complete mismanagement of funds. My one friend Kaya likes to also say that we don't have a government, and I think to a certain extent that's true. We don't have clear policies when it comes to growth. I always say it feels like it's just extremely haphazard. The way we go about planning the future of our country, of our economy, of our youth. And so yeah, for me, it really comes down to mismanagement, And then obviously there are also historical issues, colonialism happened here, and we can't forget that a large portion of South Africa's natural resources were taken out of the country, and allowed other economies to develop in a way that we weren't allowed to. But the reality is in just 20 odd years, we should be much further ahead than we are.
So I spoke to you a long time ago. I can't remember if this was on our first podcast episode or if this was at like a lunch we had long before then. But we spoke about your political aspirations, like moving forward, because there was a time where you said to me you didn't really know if the political space was still right for you. And then before that, there was a time when you said you were hoping that maybe you could become a minister someday. Is that still sort of where are your thoughts right now with regards to where you're headed?
Hey, definitely one day I want to be mayor of Tshwane, Pretoria. I love Pretoria so much, man. And so that's definitely an ambition. But then Minister of Human Settlements and Housing, for me, I've always said that to me that's the most important step for me in restoring our people's dignity, and then also all of the benefits that come with having a house. You can take out a loan, to allow your kids to study, to start a business, but for me putting a roof over everyone's head is really a first step in ensuring that we restore our people's dignity.
Okay, so I mean, that question was sort of like a base and a setup for the question which is next, and that is, how would you solve this problem? Like, if you were at the helm of this issue today, if this whole student debt crisis was put on your table today, and you have to say, here's my 5-step plan, here's my action plan for getting this sorted by next month, what is that plan looking like? And obviously, you don't have to give me the specifics, but you can sort of just give me the headlines.
Yeah, no, as I said, it's a tough one. So I would like to believe, if I was minister, that this situation would have never happened.
Because of the panel government.
Because of the panel government. But no, look, I think it really didn't take a rocket scientist to know that there'd be a huge increase in NSFAS applicants in 2021, 2020, because of COVID, I mean, it wrecked our economy, There were hundreds of thousands of people that lost their jobs. There was always going to be an increase. So one, I'd like to start off by saying, if I was minister, this would have never happened, because funds would have been made available long before, the commencement of the academic year.
From where? Where would these funds have come from?
For me, it's like we're busy talking about bailing out Eskom for another 2 billion rand right now, For me, that's one place where I'm like, no. Like,
that's ridiculous.
That's absolutely ridiculous, But again, because it's a systemic issue, it's difficult. I don't know where I would grab 4 billion from the fiscus currently, like today.
Well, 4 billion seems like a lot of money, but in a 1 trillion rand budget, 4 billion's not that much.
Fair. So you answered my question. My answer is that I would have gotten it from the 1 trillion rand budget.
All right. Yeah, that's perfect.
But look, I think a first step is to say that students should be allowed to register while this crisis is being sorted out, in terms of the short-term crisis, the NSFAS issue. But at the same time, the second point for me would be to really sort it out, because the reality is that the burden then falls on institutions of higher learning, and a lot of institutions. I mean, UP, we're lucky. There's quite a large cash reserve. I don't think I'm allowed to speak about it because I saw it in council documents, but there's a large cash reserve. But there are a lot of institutions that, without registration fees, could shut down in a month or two. And so if I was Minister of Higher Education, I'd really spend the time engaging National Treasury, engaging NSFAS, to say, look, how are we getting these funds as a matter of urgency, so we don't have institutions just collapsing all over the place. After that, I wouldn't create a commission. Commissions just cost us so much. And I was even saying to someone the other day, I presented in the Fees Commission in 2016, and presented the model that I spoke to you about, where I said that, no, it should be a loan system that's repayable once you have a job at a certain income threshold. So I wouldn't actually create a commission. I would just bring that into law. A new system, completely national. Finance system.
Gazetted tomorrow.
Yeah, gazetted tomorrow one time. I just because I'm part of a panel government, I can just move quickly like that. For me, it's, as I said, there's two issues. There's the short term and there's the long term. The short term, I think, it could be dealt with very easily, but the long term, I think the only way is to make our education system self-sustainable, and that to me is to say that once people are earning, then allow for them to pay back what they owe.
Yeah. I have this book there on the shelf. It's called The Long View by J.P. Landman, or Landman, or however you want to say it.
Landman.
Yeah, it's a book. It was written a couple of years ago. If you haven't read it, I think you'd be really into it. And anyone who has sort of political interest, I'd highly recommend it. Basically, what the book's about is, it's called The Long View, a roadmap for South Africa in 2030, or something like that. So what the book's about is following trajectories and making predictions. And one of the trajectories that they followed, looking at South Africa since 94 up until this point, is seeing that education funds are under immense strain, and it's only getting worse. It's like we are nearing towards a situation where there's a bit of an education collapse in the country, at least according to this book. And what it says is that how can we as a country with an ever-growing population expect to have an ever-growing population of intelligent, tax-paying, accredited people if we haven't built any new universities in like how many years? 40 years. The number's something like that. The last university was built in the 80s. Why are we not building a new university like left and right every second or third year? Why doesn't every major area have at least one or two universities? Because, 26 universities across the country sounds a lot, but how much is the actual student population across these universities? Do you know the number?
I would be lying.
I'm willing to bet that
I believe
number,
it's like 3 million. Though.
Yeah, I'm willing to bet that whatever the number is, it's smaller than it could be or should be, So I think that, I wonder how much money does it actually take to build a new university? Because a university that's being built today is not going to look like Tux. It's not going to have the beautiful historical sandstone buildings. It's going to be built like an office building. It's going to be built efficiently. It's going to be built well with modern amenities. It's going to be compact. We could build, if you look at universities in the States that are within major cities, like NYU is in the heart of New York City, and it's 2 buildings, 2 skyscrapers. That's NYU. And it's got a field between them. That's NYU. And it's got an enormous student population in these. Why do we not have buildings like that today, I think that building universities should be a big priority for us because it solves a lot of these problems that we're talking about. And also, a lot of these universities should be privatized, I feel like. That's also a good, or I feel like privatization is almost always a good thing.
It scares me a little bit, but I hear you.
Oh, is that so? Why do you say so?
Privatization is about profit, And I think with, like our universities as an example, they're public universities, they're meant to break even, not necessarily make a profit. And so often, like if with privatization, it can often result in the poor being excluded.
Okay, fair enough. For me, if I think about can't even say the word, I think about efficiency. Because with a need to make profit comes efficiencies and comes the cutting of unnecessary expenses. Things that are holding you back get removed and things that are driving you forward get given more attention. So I feel like if we have a situation where we privatize a university, this university is now incentivized to get as many people through the doors, bums on seats, paying their university fees as possible, which means we're going to be looking like what you said earlier about where, we could have the venues allocated at night so that we could double the student population with online students and they could come in and write their exams at night. That's not a very government institution-y thing to do. Government institutions don't work until past 5, but businesses do all the time. Like if a business is told you can double your revenue by just having skeleton staff to invigilate tests at night, they'll go for it, So we solve a lot of problems because now we're generating more revenue, things are a little bit nicer, things are looking a little bit better, we're getting rid of the stuff that we don't need, we're increasing our student population, which in turn means more revenue, and suddenly businesses have CSR, they have amounts of money that they need to pay out, they give loans, they do things on credit. That's all stuff that businesses do. So now we could say, okay, we're going to take in students on credit, we're going to take in impoverished students for free because for us as a business it looks really good, and then everyone wins in that scenario. Another thing I've always been an advocate of is privatizing our electricity in this country. I think that privatizing electricity is the biggest single step we can make towards ensuring that load shedding is not a thing anymore. Because if you're a guy who's working at Eskom, you're going to get paid either way, whether there's load shedding or not. It sucks. The government's going to bail you out next year again. You're going to get your money. Also, it doesn't really matter how much you work in a day because you're a public servant. You know you're going to get paid. You know you're not going to be fired.
Yeah, you can't be fired.
Exactly. I mean, what kind of bullshit is that? If we change it over into a private system, suddenly it's like all hands on deck. If you do not work, we will find someone who will work. You know, if you are useless at this company, you will be fired because that's a waste of money. And if we go on load shedding, that is money lost. Like time is money. They will avoid load shedding at all costs. We hear all of these stupid excuses that Eskom gives, like the coal is wet. Like, what the hell do you mean the coal is wet? How much does a tarp cost? You know, like, let's say I'm imagining they have just warehouses full of coal. Clearly with no roofs. How much does it just cost to chuck a tarp over there and keep the rain out? You know? Or let's say we're transporting them on trains and that's where they got wet. Just tuck it, you know, tarp. Tarps are not that expensive, especially not if you're a institution or you know, what do you call it? A organization or whatever. It's being bailed out for 2 billion rand. You can afford the very simple techniques to just keep your coal dry. So clearly what's going on there is there's kind of a lack of motivation because, you know, it doesn't really matter how well we do our jobs, we'll get paid. The best motivation in the world is if we do our jobs well, we're going to make a lot of money. If we do a shitty job, we're going to not have a job next month.
Yeah. No, for me, you know, like, let's look at Eskom post 2004, you know. It was one of the most well-run power utilities company in the world, you know. I mean, Eskom used to receive awards. They were well run, you know. And so I think the difficulty in this country, you know, like the way that you described, you know, private versus public, I think that our government has really done a terrible job, and as a result, we have a certain perception of the public sector, you know. But the public sector can work. On the issue of Eskom, I do agree with you. I think that Eskom should be privatized, you know. Eskom has, I think, they said about 3 times as much staff as they actually need, you know. And again, as you said, but they'll never be able to be fired. So for me, yeah, Eskom does need to be unbundled, and I would support privatization of Eskom completely. When it comes to higher education, that's like I said, I think, like I said, we're entering the 4th industrial revolution, you know. I think the idea of, you know, building new universities is sort of the same as people that are building new office parks, you know. I think that it's a thing of the past. I really think that I think that COVID showed us things, eh?
So you think we need more UNISAs?
I think we need more UNISAs, yeah. But I think at the same time, the investment that you're speaking about going to university, I think needs to be going into, you know, things like fiber, you know, libraries that actually have, you know, functioning computers, you know, so that people could access those resources.
Yes. Have you ever tried to use those computers in Marinsky Library at Tux? Holy shit.
A long time ago.
I cannot, like, it's something that I really couldn't get. And there are some students who can only use those, like who don't have any of, you know, they don't have a laptop, they don't have access to a library near them or a computer. So the Marinsky Library computers, when you try to log on, I mean, I'm not kidding right now. It takes like 15 to 20 minutes for that computer to just log into your screen. From there, you now have to use the university's Wi-Fi, which is notoriously shit, to try and log into your student portal. And now you got to sit there and take a test. Like, is that not the craziest thing you've ever heard? Your computer can barely, like, it's like dying, sputtering and coughing, power, you know? Trying to just process the fact that you've clicked on the button that says
you hear
next.
That fan.
Exactly. I mean, what? It's terrible. And this is at Tux, and Tux is supposed to be like a, you know, it's supposed to be a more affluent university where things work better. So I can't even, like, imagine what it looks like at TUT, like you said.
Yeah, or University of Venda, University of Limpopo, you know, it's a mess.
How much involvement do you have with those universities that have it a lot worse in your position?
Well, because you see, the problem is I wear so many hats. So obviously, as a councillor, none, because my focus is specifically on the city of Tshwane. But as national chair, we do then engage issues at institutions, not just university, but TVET colleges across the country, because that's the role of political organizations. And so yeah, I've been all over the country, dealing with student issues. And then what we do is generally take them back to our members of parliament in the National Assembly, and then try and get issues dealt with there, like the serious, like systemic issues.
Okay, I understand. Let's just check if that camera's still working.
Yeah, no. I've
this
been
one
good.
cut out and came back, and I'm nervous now.
Yeah, no, I've been good. I keep looking, and I'm like, it's working.
But yeah, I understand. Yes, it's difficult.
Yeah,
it's difficult to think about because our country's wealth distribution is obviously extremely skewed. If you look at our Gini coefficient, we have one of the worst in the world with regards to wealth distribution being so skewed to the top 10%, the top 5%, the top 1%. I mean, it's as bad as countries like India, which we usually associate as, these are the countries that are horrendously unequal, but we're there. We're not far behind, or I think we might even be right where they are. So it's actually shocking to think about the fact that same inequality distribution, or inequality of distribution, is reflected in our universities as well. Because you'd usually, if you think about university students as a whole, you'd think that university students have it better off than people who can't go to university, which is true in a lot of cases, but that doesn't mean that there's not still immense struggle within university students. That the poorest of the poor are not represented within student populations. It's very difficult to think about, and to try and think of a solution is so difficult. I know that people will so often say that corruption is the big, corruption's the thing, like corruption's a problem, but it's not only intentional corruption, like I am going to steal this money. It's also corruption of incompetence, like corruption of hiring, like it's human resources corruption, in the sense that we do not have the best possible people for the job, on the job. Because I feel like if we were to sweep through this whole country and identify the top 10 or the top 15 people and fill our ministers with those people, the smartest people, the best people, we'd have a much better time.
The panel government. The
panel government. Let's talk about the panel government. Okay, so ladies and gents who are watching, the panel government is the best idea ever. So, this is my idea. Said to Kwena. Oh, you know who I spoke to? It's just come back to me now. Beer Adriaanse. Okay. Who you might not know. He's an actor and a comedian. There's an Afrikaans show called Hotel, and he is on Hotel. He started out as an actor, and then he started writing for them. Such a lekker guy.
Kinda has hair like mine.
No, short.
Oh,
well,
okay.
No. You're thinking of Skalk Poseidon.
That's what I'm thinking.
I also had him on, like a month ago or 5 weeks ago. Or whatever.
I felt very jealous about that. I was like, ish.
Is it?
I felt replaced.
You felt replaced.
There could only be one curly-haired guy, and then it was like, there's someone else.
Yeah, no, Skalks was so much fun. We went to, I arrived at his place, and he lives in like a complex. And I got there, and he tells me, so we get to his place, and he takes me into this basement. And there's this tiny little sauna, okay? But when I say tiny, I mean like knees touching. Like that's how small, I'm not exaggerating at all. That's how small the sauna is. So he takes me right to the sauna. And I thought he was joking. Like he's like, right, get in the sauna. I'm like, for the podcast. He's like, we're going to record the podcast in here. I was like, I don't think this is the best place because the sauna doesn't have a light. So there's no light in the sauna at all. It's like this dark sauna. So I say, no, I'm recording video as well. So there's this table outside that we walked past. Can we record there? He's like, oh yeah, he didn't even know that was okay. Yeah, let's do that. So we set up at this table. We start chatting. Half an hour in, it starts raining. So now we have to stop the podcast. He was right. We had to stop the podcast, get the stuff inside. And we dead-ass recorded the rest of the podcast in the sauna.
In the sauna.
And so there was no light, so he brought like a bedside table lamp and sort of perched it off of one of the tiny little tables on the sauna. Like this thing could have fallen over at any moment, but luckily it didn't. And we just did a podcast in a sauna. I did a podcast in a sauna with Skalk Poseidon.
That is a story.
That's a story. That's a sentence no one has ever said. But yeah, so Beer Adrianse, much easier. He came here. We were at this table, which at the time was a different table. This is a new table. But he was here chatting with me, and we spoke about the panel government. So anyway, panel government is as follows. First thing, we remove political parties completely. Okay, that's the crux of it. Like, we take away political parties. Because when there are political parties, there are agendas. Okay, people want to like get promoted, they want to go forward, they like this guy, so they're going to pull him with them, the whole thing. It leads to terrible inefficiencies. So it was scrap political parties completely. So then you're going to say, okay, cool. Well, JC, you moron, if we don't have political parties, how are we going to know who to put in the different, very important jobs? Okay, so I'll tell you. First things first, president doesn't exist anymore. We're not going to have a president, we're going to have a prime minister. Okay, and prime minister is also not like the UK version of prime minister. Prime minister is a representative of the panel. So they have pretty much no power. They are only there to report to us what's been said by the panel. Okay, so what is this panel, you're asking? So the panel is a big room, very nice room. Okay, big room, lots of windows, and there's a nice big table. It's going to be an oval, and there's going to be seats around this table. And then we're going to divide our country up into X amounts of industries or sectors. Okay, so we're going to have an industry for housing and settlement. Okay, we're going to have, or a seat for housing and settlement. We're going to have a seat for defense. We're going to have a seat for finance, etc., agriculture, the lot. So now we've got all these seats, and every seat, we can even make it really fancy. We can have like this, the chairs have like, let's say you're the Minister of Agriculture, you have this nice big wooden chair, and on the back it's got like this farm engraved into the wood, and it's just beautiful. Yeah. And then the Minister of Housing has like this beautiful housing plan engraved into the wood, and it's very clear who sits where. No one's ever going to get upset because he stole my seat. Everyone has seats. Okay. So at the head of the table is Prime Minister. He's only there to listen, and maybe give some input here and there. So,
to chair the meeting, basically. Exactly. You need a chair.
Exactly. Yeah. So, we have the panel. So now, when we need to fill these chairs, right? Yeah. So what we're going to do is, we're going to go and we're going to find the best possible person in the country, like the person who knows the most. So for example, Minister of Agriculture, how are we going to decide who gets to be Minister of Agriculture? Well, we're going to go into the agricultural sector, and we're going to talk to some of the big players, the people who are making a real difference, the big business owners, blah, blah, blah. And we're going to hear what they have to say. Like, who's the best? Who's the guy, or the girl, who you respect the most in this industry? And then we're going to find someone who's perfect. Let's say we'll find five great people. And we'll say, okay, cool. You five have been elected to be Minister of Agriculture on the panel government. First things first, you can't have any conflict of interest. So for the time that you are serving as minister, you can't be involved in this business. You got to sell your shares. You got to be cut off from the business.
Blind trust.
Not even nothing. You got to. Sure. If we find out someone was playing sketchy, it's game over.
Like
they get replaced.
Bullets
tomorrow.
to the head. Oh, yeah. Replaced.
No, not bullets in the head. Jeez. Don't vote for Kwena, the panel government. But anyway, so get the best person there. Okay, so we'll have elections. We can have proper, like a general election, but on your election sheet, it's like 10 pages long, double-sided, and it's going to say, Minister of Agriculture. Every person will have a name, a little photo, and a bio, or maybe not a photo. We want to remove people's biases. Maybe not even a name. Like, we'll just have bios.
Just their CVs.
Just their CVs. Yes, that would be great.
So my question, who's choosing the five people? Like, who's choosing who's the best? So the
industry chooses the five. The industry
itself
itself
there'll be a little industry election.
Yes, we'll have an industry election first amongst the shareholders of the industry. So we'll take all the best companies, we'll take all their boards of directors and all their upper level management.
Okay.
We'll take all the people who are working in transport of agricultural goods. Like, you'll be classed in the census. You'll be put in a sector as a person who works. So then, first they nominate 5. Then the whole country votes based on CVs. Okay, so it's not just a CV like who went to what university. There's also a little piece. I, as a person who's applying to be on the panel government, I get to write a paragraph or 2 paragraphs or 10 saying this is why I should be on the panel government. So then we do that for every sector, and we have an election week. Like, it's going to take a while to read this. This information will be publicly available.
Serious CVs.
Exactly. This information will be available before the election. Okay. So people get to read this. They go in on the day. They say, right, I know exactly who I'm going to vote for. They vote. Okay. Now we have the panel. It's full of the best, smartest people in the country. If I have a question about agriculture, you best know that Frick, who has been farming in the Free State for the past 50 years, he is the best farmer ever. He served on the council for his area. He's now retired. You best know he's going to know the answer to that question. Like, no doubt about it. Okay. So we get those people there. Now, we start a new channel on TV and on radio.
Can I ask one question about the election first, though?
Of course, yes.
So why is everyone voting for every position? Because I don't know anything about agriculture. So if I'm reading that CV, I'm seeing a whole bunch of things, but that probably mean nothing to me as a non-farmer. So
that might actually be a good point. But how do you think the population will respond to you telling them you get to vote for almost no one? Like, because if let's say there are 20 people around this table, I'm only going to be working in one industry. So I'm only going to be able to vote on just the one thing.
But then don't you think it's still going to be just luck of the draw? I mean, it's if I'm just there and I'm like, sure, like, I'm tired, I'm not reading through these 20-page CVs, yes. I'm just going for person C, you know?
Okay, Kwena makes a good point. So we're going to have industry votes only, I reckon. That would be good. Okay. And then we'll also have experts. We'll have industries plus experts plus, we'll find a way. This is a fresh new idea. Okay? We haven't developed this that much. So anyway, got the panel. So we start a new channel, TV, radio. We can have them on the podcast if they really want to. We'll put them everywhere. And this channel is free for everyone. Like, if you have a TV, if you have a radio, if you have a phone, if you have a walkie-talkie, you can tune into this channel. And what this channel is a live feed from the panel government's office, okay? From the panel, from the table. So if anything happens, so let's say, for example, we'll take this current situation, student crisis, okay? Student debt crisis. News 24, student debt crisis. It's a shit show. Is a big story. Emergency meeting, panel government, sort of like we've been doing lately with Cyril's speeches. We get the text on our phones, panel government emergency meeting to address the student debt crisis at 5 p.m. today. Cool. In come the people. They sit around the table. Minister of Education, he's the most relevant guy here. He starts. He says, okay, cool. Listen, we've got a massive problem with NSFAS. There's been a debt issue. There's been finance shortfalls. We cannot get up from this table until we have a solution. Okay. So now they start chatting. And keep in mind, everyone's going to have their 2 cents to throw at this issue. So maybe not the Minister of Agriculture, but this involves a couple of different people. The Minister of Finance is there. He's very much affected by this decision. So he's going to make a couple of inputs. Minister of Housing is going to have something to say, whatever. So now, as they are going, there's this tweet line open. Tweets, SMSs, blah, blah, blah. We can have a whole call center. We can outsource it to India. Processing all of the public's questions, queries, and suggestions. They are all coming in. Okay. So now the panel government meets, they discuss, they lay all the facts on the table, they talk about, like, let's say, first draft of their plan. And keep in mind, the world or the public very much can watch this if they wanted to. So now, draft is on the table. In comes Prime Minister. Okay, he's the people's rep. He comes in. He says, right, listen, great first draft, really, like an English teacher. Great first draft, but I think it needs some work, And here comes his page that he's just printed, and it says, red pen. Okay, it says, here are the suggestions, comments, queries, concerns from the country. And he starts listing them. He says, right, we listen to the country, and the country spoke.
Mm.
This is what they said. Okay. And here he says, right, well, Minister of Finance, you said that we are going to get this money from pulling cash from X. Okay. I've received a message from Nochlapo who says that's not going to work, man. And he'll explain why. So he reads out Nochlapo's explanation. And then the Minister of Finance gets to say, okay, that makes sense. We didn't consider that. Let's discuss that first. They talk about it. They get to a new resolution. Or he gets to say, actually, Nhlapo, you're completely wrong. And I'll explain why. And he explains why. Okay.
It's going to be a long meeting.
It's going to be a long meeting, man. But we can take intermissions. We can take breaks. But point
what if
is,
like 10,000 people send messages though?
we'll sort them into categories. Kind of like I do when I take polls on Faculty of Memes.
Okay.
I get like 30 messages that all say the same thing.
Oh, you say
So
this one.
I take the one that explains it best and I repost that one.
Okay.
So over time, this idea is talked through, and until we're all in agreement on an action plan, we lay out that action plan. The country, like as long as the majority agrees, it's a democracy, blah, blah, blah. And we implement that plan. Now, 2 months down the line, either that plan works and everything's great because we got the best, really smart people, so it's very likely to work, or the plan doesn't work. But now, we're not going to say, our government is so shit.
Yeah,
Our
so
plan doesn't,
we messed
because
up.
everyone messed up. Like we all knew what the plan was. We all were fully on board. We understood this plan. And if you are going to be that arsehole who says, well, I never agreed with this stupid plan in the first place, then the next question is, well, why didn't you say so? You had the opportunity. The panel government was sitting there waiting for your response and you said nothing. Why did you not raise your concerns before this happened? So that way, we get a government that's like a glass house and everyone can see straight through, which means there's never going to be corruption. Like there's money goes where it goes. We know why it goes there. We know it was discussed. We have the minutes of the meeting. They're publicly available. You can just control F and you'll find exactly where that money came from and where it went. And we can really go and get to the core of every decision and we can really understand. And then firstly, people will start to really like the government because it's kind of like everyone's involved, you know? Everyone has a seat at the panel. Secondly, we respect them because they're really smart. You know, these are some really like clever people. They know exactly what they're talking about. Third, no more corruption. We'll be the best country ever overnight. Like remember back in the day, apparently before apartheid was abolished, like, and before there were sanctions and all that, like long ago, we used to be like the top exporter on the planet of agricultural products. Like we were that good. Our natural resources didn't go anywhere. We can still be that, you know. We just need to get there with appropriate management of funds, and we need to get there in the right way. Obviously, previously, it was based on an apartheid system, which was not ideal. Not ideal is an understatement. It was terrible. It was the worst thing ever. But the point is, those resources are still there. We still have that land. We can still be really good at agriculture. Why are we not as good now as we used to be? You know how we get there?
Panel government.
Government.
No, you know, like I'm starting to slowly, you know, come on board with this idea of a panel government, and I think there are a lot of similarities between the government you're describing and China's government.
China's communist government.
Yes, and I'll tell you why.
Okay,
so essentially, you said no political parties.
Yeah, but in China,
there's
you're
one
not allowed
party.
to have China's a dictatorship.
There's one party, okay?
Yes,
so
okay.
So this is what I'm saying. There are similarities. And I think that in terms of while you're still shaping this thing of the panel government, there's things you can learn from China. So one, there's one party. You're saying no parties, but now we're saying because there's one party, is there really a party? There's not.
Yeah,
you know?
okay, fair enough.
So we're going to say that there are no parties in China. Then, in terms of China's system, they also ensure that they have the best of the best inside ministerial positions. So in order to get to their national committee, which would be the equivalent of your panel, you must first have served, 5 years at a municipal level, 5 years at a provincial level, 5 years at national level, and then only do you qualify to be inside that position. So you have served inside the public sector for 15 years before you can become a minister. Then, I'm not going to lie, I really like China these days. There's obviously a lot of issues, but...
Yes, a lot of really, really bad issues.
But besides all the really bad issues. So they've also got, because I watch China TV all the time. I don't watch CNN anymore. I watch a lot of China TV. You should check it out. It's on DSTV.
Oh, it is.
And what
What,
they...
like China's news network?
Yeah.
But hold on. I'm under the impression that China's like propaganda central right now. Like, as far as I'm aware, because China's banned a whole, like Facebook is banned in China.
Yes.
They have and all Facebook's conglomerates, by the way, like Instagram and WhatsApp, all banned.
Yeah, you can use WeChat.
We can use WeChat.
Yeah.
Also, they can't access the same internet as us. It's very much a terrible place.
We'll go into those things just now as well.
Okay, so what Kwena's saying...
Now you've got
what you're saying is, if you watch Chinese news, everything looks great.
No. I'm gonna get into details now. Right. But you must watch China TV. So, as I learned a lot about China from China TV. So they've got also what they call the National Consultative. How do you say that?
Consultative,
Yeah, Consultative Congress, right?
Or consultative or whatever.
Yeah,
okay,
but you understand
the gist, yeah.
So what they do is that they bring industry leaders. So you've got your minister, but they bring industry leaders and they'll say, okay, in IT, what are we doing? And then industry leaders present and they say, look, this is the way in which the IT space is moving. That's the way in which the IT space is moving. This is where we need to improve. And they do that for all of the various sectors, So in that sense, even though they're not consulting the whole country, they're consulting the leaders inside those fields. And I mean, China grew from a farmer state,
into a global powerhouse.
Yeah, and so there are things to learn from China. There's obviously a lot where we can say that,
if you ignore the human rights abuses and the Muslim camps.
Yeah, no, that thing we're saying.
And the genocides.
That thing we're saying no to. We're saying 100% no.
Okay, hold on. That's kind of like looking at apartheid. Looking at South Africa and going, well.
You did. You said that the exports were good.
Yeah, but I'm saying we can get back to that without apartheid.
Yeah, and I'm saying is that we could get to that without saying that there's no freedom of speech or without, So I'm saying let's take...
let's take the best parts of China as an example.
Yeah.
And let's make sure that we don't...
And figure out how you link that to your panel government, And then maybe a controversial thing, But there are certain things about China where I'm like, like the thing of privacy. I'm like, there's no crime there. Like I have a friend that stays in China, and there's cameras everywhere, like you are always watched. The stuff on your phone is not yours, But if I'm texting you to say, bro, let's go rob that place across the corner, I'm like, if they can pick up on that,
and they will,
and they've got cameras everywhere that like I will be tracked down. I'm like, I don't mind giving that up. I'm like, I don't really care if someone's there and they see my nudes. I'm like, what? Yeah. Let's go back to Polaroids for that.
I gotta tell you, that's something that's a bit of a controversial opinion, but it's one that I share a lot. Is that, especially if you look at the US, people are so terrified about, for example, being tracked. And I spoke to Lerato Ndlovu a couple months ago. Spoke to her about this, and she was talking about, she straight up asked me, look me in the face, Kwena. She said, is there a microchip in the vaccine? Okay. So she asked me this question, and obviously it was born from the conspiracy theory that there's a microchip in the vaccine and it's going to track you. But the thing is, firstly, people are already being tracked. Like if they wanted to track you, they don't need to pop
exactly on a vaccine.
Exactly.
With my phone.
Exactly. That's what I say. You carry your phone everywhere you go, 24/7. If they want to track you, they can just track your phone, which is really easy to do. So they don't need to put a chip in the vaccine. But anyway, so why are you so afraid of being tracked? Like that's like if you are 99.9% of the population, you are just going about your day. You're doing your normal stuff. You're going to work. You're coming back. You're moving house. You're doing this and that. The only time you would need to worry about being tracked is if you have done something terrible, like you have committed a murder and you don't want to get caught and your location will give you away.
Yeah.
Like, there's no reason why a normal, mild-mannered person should object to being tracked. In fact, in a lot of cases, being tracked could be really beneficial. So, for example, let's say I go hiking. Okay, have you ever watched 127 Hours?
Exactly.
Okay, I go hiking.
So where are you?
Exactly.
I said, did.
I go hiking. I fall into a cavern and a rock crushes my hand and I can't move. The government sees, hold on, this guy, he just went into the middle of nowhere and he's just sitting there.
Yeah.
Like, he's just there.
Yeah.
Maybe we should check if he's all right. You know? Like, then that's great. Discovery has something like that. They track your car, right?
Yeah.
If your car goes into a dodgy area, Discovery calls and they go, hey,
Are you okay?
are you all right, man? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, do you need us to root you out of there? What are you even... also, Discovery will send you a text message if you brake too hard. Like, they'll be like, hey, man, just calm it down with the braking a little. So, obviously, the thing that people are worried about is if you give up your freedom to privacy with regard to your location, then this can be abused later. But I'm struggling to figure out how this can be abused in your normal day-to-day life. You know, the only time this power can ever be abused is in like what do they call those books that are set in the future where things have gone really bad? Dystopia.
Dystopia,
Like in a dystopian future where the government is trying to catch the rebels and blah, blah, blah. That's when being tracked is a real shit situation. But what country on the planet is in a dystopian teen novel right now? You know, it's not happening.
And I think for me, like, I understand, it's like, look, and I must say, I'm not representing my party's views on this at all, you know? But like, look, obviously there's the fear of what that data could be used for and like the manipulation that it could be used for, like we talked about the Great Hack before, you know? But I think if you work on those laws, you know, not allowing big conglomerates to use data in order to manipulate you, then I'm like, it's as you said, if I fall in a ditch and my government can track me, or if you know, like, government has my fingerprints, they have my facial recognition, and you know, and I go missing, but cameras pick me up in a second, you know. It's like the moment I get taken out of that van with the blacked out windows, there's a camera that says he's there, you know. I'm like, I don't have an issue with that.
Okay, so I actually want to ask a question. The people who are listening to this, I know that on podcasting apps you can't really do this, but if you are on a podcasting app, pop over to YouTube and go comment, or you can even send me a DM. I'm at JCSteyn_. Go send me a DM or comment on YouTube and tell the future panel government, tell us, why are you afraid of being tracked? Because I feel like I'm very much missing something. Because there's a large percentage of the population that is terrified of being tracked. And I just don't quite understand why. Because I don't understand, okay, so you're being tracked, the government has your location at any given time, now what? Like, what's the next step? What's the step 2 that you are terrified of?
Ballistic missiles.
Exactly.
You know?
Like, if you are going to be shot for like some terrible crime, I'm cool with the government having your location too. Like, so there's two. So either you're a normal, mild-mannered person going about your day, and when I say mild-mannered, I'm including really extraordinary people who are just not doing anything illegal. Okay, so you're just a normal person who's doing a great job at your life. You don't need to worry about being tracked. Or you're someone doing really sketchy shit. Okay, who I want you to be tracked. You're doing really sketchy shit. Like if you're someone who's plotting, you know, to blow up a building, obviously you don't want to be tracked. But I also think everyone else wants you tracked, you know? So it works for everyone. Either you're being protected from someone scary, or you are being saved from potentially bad situations. Like, for example, let's say everyone was being tracked and some girl just got kidnapped, okay? Not only could we immediately see where she is, but we could also see who kidnapped her, because who's with her right now, you know? I think it has a lot of benefits. But maybe I'm a moron, so please do comment down below if you have a reason to be terrified.
Yeah, no, there are positives and there are negatives, you
Yeah.
know, and I suspect there'll be a lot of mention of the negatives. But I've weighed it out, and I would prefer it to
Yeah.
be tracked.
I think
then
it should, even if it's an opt-in, opt-out system.
everyone must be in.
Yeah, I'll opt. I'm down to be tracked. Also, so imagine we actually did go somewhere and they injected microchips into us, okay? These microchips could track you without internet, so it wasn't a situation of your phone dying and they don't know where you are. Also, it could track your vitals, okay? That would be fantastic. Like, imagine it could track your heart rate. So now, take all those scenarios we just spoke about, but up the efficiency level by like 100%, because now, suddenly, John's heart rate is through the roof and he's not at a gym. What is going on with John? He's in a car right now. His heart rate should not be that high. Something's wrong.
Yeah.
Let's figure out what's going on. Yeah. Or someone dies. Like if someone dies and they're in the middle of nowhere, we can immediately say, let's go fetch the body. Let's notify the family. Let's not have everyone wonder where this missing person is. Like, what's that little girl who got lost in Portugal? Madeleine McCann.
Was that the one that was gone for like 20 years?
She's
or something
still
like
gone.
that?
Like no one knows where she is. Like Madeleine McCann would not happen. Also, what if you're a parent? Okay, so let's say this. As a parent, you have the right to see your child's location until they turn 18. Once they turn 18, it switches off automatically. Like everyone has an app. You can view your family's location if they allow you. You can view your children's location automatically. And when they turn 18, it goes to the opt-in, opt-out system for them. That would be great too. Like you could see where your kids are. You could see if everyone's doing all right. I think there's a lot of benefits.
Yeah. And I feel like we're moving in that direction, you know. Me, I can take out my phone right now. I can tell you where majority of my friends are. I like Find My Friends. It excites me so much.
Do you have friends on your Find My Friends?
Yes, I force people. Like when I'm like, hey, bro, I'm like, I want to see where you are, you know.
Seriously,
and I wake up
I
in the
only have my
mornings
family
and I
on
look.
Find My Friends.
Yeah, no, I've got friends, family, like, because I like the idea of, like, I really think data can help with a lot of things, you know. And it's like you're saying, like with my Apple Watch, you know, I'm not wearing it now. I don't know why.
I just took mine off for this podcast.
Yeah.
Somewhere here.
But I mean, even with my Apple Watch, you know, if I fall, it can inform people. If my heart rate suddenly spikes, it can inform people. And so I personally wouldn't be that against being chipped, you know, as long as I know I'm being chipped. Like exactly. Not like it mustn't be a vaccine where it's like, oh, haha, sorry, you've got a chip in you now.
Also, it's so the problem is if you move into a situation where you have an authoritarian government that's abusing people's rights, now we have a big problem.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we come back to the panel government, this is something that I'm thinking about now while we're speaking is how do we avoid the panel government becoming how do we avoid it becoming a dictatorship where the same people essentially are just voted in year after year? Like there has to be some way for us to protect a true democracy in that regard, because we can do what China does and make it look like there's a democracy, or Russia does. They make it look like there's a democracy, but in actual fact, I mean, there's no real elections. It's all just really for show. So you'd need some sort of contingency plan, I feel. Like, let's say, not only did we have a panel government, but all around the world there were other panel governments. We need to have a contingency plan where we sign an accord saying, if our government goes to shit and our people start to suffer, that country will come in and they will evict, you know? They will I know this sounds very drastic, but these are drastic times.
No, but I mean, if you think about it, we already do have those structures. We have the AU, we have the UN, but generally countries still won't get involved.
Yeah, I wonder why. I think it's just because the consequences are so hectic.
Invading another country, because best believe that panel government where things are falling apart aren't going to say, okay, fine, you're coming.
Yeah.
So we are fighting to the death.
Yes, exactly. But I think these are important conversations. These are questions worth asking because we've had the same system of government for centuries, you know? Like before, if we look back in the olden days, we had monarchs, you know, we had royal families that governed a country. Then we moved into a more a more democratic era with like the Romans and the Greeks were the first to really use this. And, people were elected and people were chosen. But now we've moved into a new space where so many things are possible that were never possible before. We can contact people fast. We can share information really fast. I think it's starting to call for a more efficient system of government that's just better in a lot of ways. And there will be remnants of the old system that will have to come with. But I think that there really is a lot to be said for an idea similar to or close to the panel government that I've been pitching nonstop on this podcast.
Or the one party state. I think when you research it, you'll realize that you're very close to it.
Yeah, but I feel like there's that phrase, which is absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yeah.
Where's that from?
I'm not sure.
It's
one of those phrases.
My head's telling me Animal Farm, but it's not Animal Farm. Is it Animal Farm?
It could be.
It's one of those.
Animal Farm has that principle,
yeah,
basically.
Yeah. So, anyway, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So, there needs to be a way to have a panel government that is really powerful and can make great decisions, but still very much at the mercy of the population. So for example, let's say we remove this idea of terms, okay? So you don't have to serve for 4 years or whatever. If you are doing a shit job, you get replaced today. Like, it's like any other job. You get replaced. You give your 2 weeks notice and game over for you. We put the next best person in. I think that could go a long way. Because in a panel government system, as soon as we even start to smell something shady, it's not up to the rest of the panel, who could also, in theory, be in on it, to get this person out. It's up to the population, because you know that the population picks up on these things. Like, people pick up on corruption fast. Like, people start to realize because they feel it. They feel it in their pockets. They feel it in their living situations when things are not being allocated quite right. People know when the maths doesn't quite add up.
Yeah.
So as soon as the maths doesn't quite add up, that's when people's representative, Prime Minister, pops in and says, hey, dude, Mr. Minister of Finance, we've been getting a lot of complaints about you lately. I need you to answer these questions to the population now. And if you cannot answer why you made the decisions that you made, we're going to have a re-election next week.
No, to now continue panel beating, this idea of the panel government, I think what you would need as well is really a, 40 to 50 year plan. And as part of that, it can be allowed to evolve, and because the world evolves, but there must be a direction. And part of sitting on that panel is that you need to be moving in that direction. I'll go back to China. It's not that China just developed overnight. But there was a plan. And I think that one of the difficulties we might have with the panel government, but similar to our current democracy, is that if there's a constant replacement of your politicians or your public representatives or whatever it is, there's often then a constant change in sort of direction and in policy, and that doesn't allow for growth. If the ANC is governing inside this municipality, and then 5 years from now the EFF governs and they say our policies are different, so that plant you were building, we're actually not going to do it anymore. And then the DA comes in and then we say we don't agree, we're going to privatize it. Like, it doesn't allow for a clear direction in terms of growth.
So what if we say that every 5 years or every 10 years, the government is going to, the panel will come in front of the populace, we make it like a public holiday, like there's a day for this. The government's going to come out, please everyone watch, and we are going to pitch our 10-year plan for South Africa. And then we're going to sign that plan into legislation, everyone agrees. If something dramatic changes, like let's say there's an earthquake and the plan just dead ass does not work anymore, then the panel comes again. They say, listen, in light of the earthquake, we've made these adjustments. But also, if one of the panel members gets replaced, they know that they are responsible for continuing to carry out that plan, at least until such a time as a new plan is drafted and they can give more input there. I think, you see, this is what I think is cool about this idea, is that we've now just been sitting here and we've been like shooting ideas back and forth and bouncing ideas off of each other. And already we've made a lot of progress, like the first version of this idea that I pitched to you like back in October is very different. And arguably a lot better and
Yeah,
more sophisticated
we're growing.
than the idea now. So imagine we got in a lot of really, really smart people a lot smarter than we are, industry experts, political experts, economists, blah, 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 and they sat down every Monday for 6 months and they really talk this through. I think that we could come up with something really special.
But don't you think that there'd need to be a revolution then? Because a core part of your panel government
is the government going away. It's a fact, man. It's a fact. We're gonna need the ANC. Yeah, that's a problem. Hey? That's a big problem because not only the ANC we know to be like a party who's got a massive influence. They will just tell their people like, we don't like this idea.
It's just like
vote against panel government.
Yeah.
And then the DA will also, because every party will reject this idea because it essentially means they will cease to exist the next day. So the only way to really go about this is to start your own political party, which is all about the panel government, and then grow slowly over years, and then eventually win the election with majority, and then you can implement this idea.
Yeah, you're right. Then you change the constitution, and
exactly. I think you know what I'll do, hey? So over the course of this podcast, I've had some really interesting people on the show, and I'm looking forward to, like, at a stage I was trying to get a COVID expert on the show, but they don't answer my emails. I assume they're too busy. You know? So anyway, over time, let's say I get this really clever economist on the show, blah, blah, blah. So once we've got like a really lacquer group of people with a lot of different, let's start the panel party.
Yeah, we should have a panel actually. Okay,
we'll start the panel party. And then let's just see what happens. Let's see how many votes we get.
I mean, I'm not starting a panel party. I just want to be clear about that. But I think
on the phone right now.
I think we should have a panel though. Like, I think that'd be quite cool. You know, bring a whole bunch of people and we continue to work on this idea.
Yes,
because
work on it from the inside out.
Yeah, it keeps becoming more and more real for me. I'm
but right now we have Parliament. Right, which is it's like a massive panel. We just have a lot of people. But the problem is that the people in Parliament are not there because they are experts. They're not there because they are clever. They are there because they just happen to be a member of a party that has seats. You know, I think we need to shrink that. How many seats are in Parliament right now? It's like,
I want to say
like 3.
I think 400 and something.
400. I don't even know. 400 and something. That needs to be way less. Like at most we need to do 40. 40,
it's like
40 people, and then also we can't just let anyone in there. Like, we can't just let people rock up and just start, you know, like chatting shit about politics. We need to have proper qualified people in there. Also, people should not be allowed to sit together. Like, that's something I feel like is a real thing. So there's no uniforms. Yeah, no. I mean, all the EFF people should not be allowed to sit next to each other. Like, you should come in, take a number, it'll be randomized, and that number will assign your seat for that meeting. Because right now, so there's this theory in psychology that I read about a long time ago. It's got to do with negotiation. There's a book I read, it's also somewhere on the shelf, it's called The Negotiation Book. And it's just basically a book about negotiation tactics and techniques and the psychology behind negotiation. And one of the things they say in this book is, if you walk into a meeting and you know someone is going to disagree with you, sit next to them. Like, it's a big power move. Because if you go sit next to that person who's likely to disagree with you, suddenly you're like all up in their face. They're not going to start yelling at you from right next to you. You know, it'll be a much more civilized conversation. So now imagine you had this panel government, even if we enforce it in our current system and cut it down to 40, but groups of like-minded people from different parties were not allowed to sit right next to each other. But now, instead of having, you know, 30% DA people, 50% ANC people, 20% EFF, and then a couple more stragglers, now we just have 40 individuals who are there to discuss issues individually. Also, when people start logging their votes for different issues, those votes should be anonymous, and those votes should not reflect party at all. Like, these are our 40 chosen individuals. Who cares what party they are? When they walk through this door, they are anonymous and they will vote based on what they believe is best.
No, it's very interesting. Because I also think just in general, we do need to start moving in that direction as a country, because the reality is coalitions are the future, you know. We see it. I don't think, most municipalities are going to be coalition governments. I think in 2024, a lot of provincial governments and potentially even national government will be a coalition. And we really don't know how to do coalition government inside South Africa, you know. It's like because we don't have that ability to engage, to negotiate.
So talk to me about back when you were SRC president. You had to have you must have to have a system where you are SRC president, but the deputy has to come from another party, right?
Well, yeah, basically.
Yeah. So if the DA wins the election, the deputy has to be someone from
whoever came second.
Yeah. And it'll obviously, if they came second, they won't be from your party.
Yeah.
And then also now, in your capacity as councillor and DASO and blah, 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 you have a lot of opportunity where you do need to work with other political parties. How is that experience in general? Like, is it extremely difficult? Or are there ways that you've learned to work harmoniously with people who have such disagreeing philosophies?
So I think the issue always comes down to more the upper levels of leadership. So in my SRC, as an example, all of us got along. You would have really actually never known who was part of the DA, who was part of the EFF, you know. The only thing we ever, where it was very political, is where we were like, Sasco must go, you know. But besides that, we were very apolitical. And I think it was because in the end of the day, we could all agree that we wanted to serve students, you know. And then shifting that to council, the way council works is that there's the actual council sitting where all councillors sit and vote on various reports, but then there are committees, and each committee is doing oversight on departments. So you'll have, like, I sit on economic development and spatial planning, and then I sit on health. And I find that in those spaces, there's generally space for engagement, you know. That's where you'll find ANC member and an EFF member and a DA member all saying, yeah, this is the way we need to go. And then that gets taken to council. But then what happens in council, because that's where the cameras are, you know, you've got your whole like row of just media sitting behind you. That's suddenly where there's almost no engagement, you know. But it's because it's for television, you know, and it's more politicking than governing.
But you've said to me before, last time we spoke, you said to me that there would be situations where you were debating with someone where literally in ad breaks, the two of you would be joking and chatting.
Oh yeah, no, 100%.
They say, right, we're live in 3, 2, 1, and then it's back at each other's throats. I think that's something which is important, is either record nothing and get rid of that problem, which isn't ideal because a lot of other problems would come from it, or record everything. And then people don't have time to, you know, parade for the TVs because they need to really get down to business, you know?
Yeah, no, it's a tricky one because it is, and it's I mean, it's as when you point out the flaws in the idea of political organizations, is that obviously the role of a political organization is to get votes, you know, and so inevitably there is some showmanship involved in that, you know.
It's kind of like that's sort of the root, one of the root causes behind the problem we started with, the whole debt crisis, is because Jacob Zuma, who was president at the time, said free education's coming. I remember hearing that. I think I was in high school, man. I was like hearing that and thought, no, it isn't. Like, it wasn't high. I was in high school.
Yeah, I think it was 2016.
Our economics teacher walked us through why that was not possible. Like, she explained it to us. She explained it on the board for us with a, you know, here's how the budget works, here's how this works.
This is not possible.
Let's do the quick maths and we'll figure out that this is impossible. And I feel like if a high school class, and we were like, you know, a couple of kids in this class just being taught high school economics, if we could figure that out in a, you know, 40-minute class, surely an hour and a half quick documentary on SABC could explain to people why it's not possible. But there's no political reason to clear up the confusion. so we don't.
And remember, it was even, with that, because it was a completely political statement. There was the Fees Commission, and the Fee Commission ruled, as part of their report, that they said free higher education isn't feasible. And even after that, there was Jay-Z saying, "Woo,
it's coming.
It's coming.
It's coming like a thief in the night. You won't even know. One day you'll just wake up. One day you will wake up and you'll get no invoice." Yes, I can't believe it. Do you think he's going to go to jail with this whole thing that's going on right now?
I think he will.
You reckon?
But I don't.
You think it's going to be like a cushy white collar type prison?
No, ANC politics is very interesting at the moment. So there's obviously deep divisions between that Cyril faction and that Zuma faction, and that's why you see Ace being attacked these days, is that he's part of that Zuma faction. I think there'll be a split in the ANC. I think it's inevitable. And I think as part of that split, and maybe it'll be the catalyst of that split, is Zuma going to jail. Because sort of the culture in the ANC has always been, it's like corruption has been rife even like before 94, and there's always just been that unwritten rule that we're together, and if, okay, this minister has stolen, let's just move you to, a legislature position, or we'll just move you to being a councillor, or, but the fact that state machinery is actually moving against Jacob Zuma, there are a lot inside that faction that are saying, no, Cyril is going after Zuma. And so I think that would be the shift. And I think
a split in the ANC would be just fantastic for the DA, because that would probably put the DA in real competition to take a majority vote.
What I suspect, but I could be 100% wrong, I suspect that there'll be a split, that the EFF will no longer be the EFF, and that a new party will be formed with EFF and with the Zuma faction.
Whew.
Yeah, that's what.
Is that a country you want to live in?
I don't know. As you saw, Julius met with Zuma. He went for that tea.
When was that?
It was earlier this year. It was all over like the newspapers and stuff. But yeah, Julius went Zuma's place, and they had tea. They took pictures together.
What do you think happens then? Then the DA and the Cyril faction come together to defeat this.
Steyn hasn't got in trouble for speaking about that, so I'm not going to speak about it.
Okay, don't speak about that.
But as I say, I think that the reality is that coalitions are the future of this country, and do with that what you will.
Yes, What a shit show. Yes. The politics in this country are just so complicated, and there's so many names you have to remember, and there's like you stop watching the news for a week and you completely just fall off the wagon. You have no idea what's going on. To relearn everything, it's difficult. What pushes a person like you to go and try and work in there? Like throw yourself into this extreme, just like grinding mass of what we call our political space, and just yeet yourself in and hope for the best.
Yeah, no, for me, I always have wanted to make a difference, that's always from primary school, I was taking up leadership positions. I was even saying to a friend the other day, we were talking about it. I was like, I remember my first idea of, or my first sort of leadership in practice. I remember it was in preschool. I got everyone to eat grass, and I said to him, I was like, from that moment I knew that I had that thing, and I was like, I can either make people eat grass or I can use my powers for good, You
made people eat grass.
Yeah, we were all eating grass, and hey, he called me Bushiri. He said, but even in primary school, I remember I once staged a walkout in primary school. My mom got called in, and she was like, "No, I agree with him." So for me, it's always just been.
What was the walkout for?
It was hectic. So what happened was we had these speech festivals, right? And where you had to recite this poem, and the only people that would get the like there was like a gold star or something like that. I think there was bronze, silver, gold, and double gold. That was it. So the only people that would get gold and double gold were people with British accents, because it was a Cambridge school, so it was people with British accents, or people like me that had interesting accents, you know.
Oh, I see.
But then the whole bronze and silver is just people of color, you know. So then I was like, there's something wrong here, you know. And I was like, it's the accents. Then I was like, I think I was like 8 at the time, you know. And I said, it's like let's let's go out, and then we all just went and chilled in the playground.
That's crazy. I remember I used to be in a choir when I was in primary school, and we used to be so angry because we would go to these. So we'd practice all these, like, we had this one song that we sang. We sang an entire song in like Latin or something, or some like romantic long lost language.
Yeah.
We sang a whole song, like we learnt it phonetically.
Yes.
As a like a choir of like 3rd graders, you know. And we were impressive. We were amazing choir. So we get to this. This is a true story, by the way. I'm not making this up. And looking back on this now, how did this even happen? But anyway, so we went to this choir competition. We did this amazing, we precious little children doing our little choir. And I think of the like 6 schools that were there, we were the only school that had white people, okay? Like all the other schools were predominantly black people. So we go up, and all the other schools start doing like Zulu-type songs, and they had dancing, and they wore costumes. And Kwena, I shit you not, I'm not joking, there were topless girls our age. I'm talking like grade 3, 4, 5. They were topless girls because they were wearing the traditional uniforms that didn't have any like chest coverage or whatever. And to a little grade like 4 kid, I was like, what is going on right now? But we just got smoked in that competition. Like, we lost so badly. We came like 5th out of the 6 schools. But it didn't. Our teacher lodged a formal complaint because these other schools that came up top were the schools doing like the Zulu dances, and they had the uniforms. There were like rules to this competition. You weren't allowed to wear costumes. You weren't allowed to dance. You weren't allowed to have gimmicks and stuff. They did all of those things, and they won the competition. Yeah, did we think that was bullshit? Like that. Why does that happen still? Or I don't know if it still happens. You were in school. How old are you now? Like 20?
26.
So you're what? You're 5 years older than me. So that means that we were in primary school around the same time. Do you think that sort of shit still happens?
Well, I was at a very small school, so like
same.
So
Our school had
like
140 kids.
we didn't compete in anything,
Oh,
Like when I was in high school, we didn't even have grass. Like it was just this like house basically.
So when you finally did get grass, you decided to convince your whole grade to eat it.
That was in preschool.
Is this why you had no grass?
Yeah, right. Actually, my mom after that was like, no, only concrete. I've seen what happens when you have grass, but yeah, no. So I've never, besides sports events, which I always dominated at. Just for the record, yeah.
I wasn't that great.
Oh no! Well, there was one year. I remember it was my last year of primary school, or my first year of high school. I forget, but went to this track meet. Ran this race. I came 4th, and I was just like fuck this shit. Like, I'm a bad loser. Well, it's not actually, I'm not a bad loser, but I hate losing. So I went home. From that day, I trained the entire year, every single day, until that next track meet. It was like grade 7. Me, I had 8 packs when I came back. Like, it's insane. I'll send you the picture afterwards. You can put it up on the screen. We'll put it up right now. Yeah, I had 8 packs, and I won every single. I think I got like 6 gold medals. I ran everything I could. I was like, I'm here for blood.
So what you're saying is the base thing. So this is what we're going to do, right? I'm going to get Kwena in on the panel government. And then we're going to lose an election on purpose so that Kwena can get like crazy competitive, be the best politician ever, so that by the time 4 years later, when that next election comes, we're going to win with 90% majority, game over, and Kwena you can have an 8-pack then too if you want.
I mean, that's what happened at UP. I contested 2016, I won, I was removed, and I was like, oh, I fought, and then when we eventually did decide to run again, we won everything, And it's
Okay,
like,
I
yeah,
see.
me, I hold grudges. I have this bank. People don't know it. I'll smile at you, but but I'm just waiting for my
You see,
time,
this is going to happen. I'm sitting here right now on this podcast with Kwena having a great time. He's thinking, I'm going to have a way better podcast than this. I'm going to get an invite a year from now. Hey, JC, please come on the Kwena Moloto show. We have
And
double your
I'll
follow.
even call it the panel, just to be an
The
asshole.
Oh, my soul. Oh. What a time to be alive.
What a time to be alive, brother.
Jeez. Okay, so I want to ask you, so when you are in a situation you're in the opposition party, right? When you're in a situation and you are trying to contest with someone, you told me a story once that you went to a school to go speak, or not a school, like a I think you said you went to...
It was University of Venda.
Yeah, you went to University of Venda, and the EFF guy was there too, and like 99% of people went to go listen to him, and you had like 7 people listening to you. How does that make you feel?
No, I don't take such things personally, Like, I mean, at UP, I've spoken to big crowds. We all have our constituencies. And that definitely wasn't mine. It was definitely the EFFs. So yeah, no, I can speak to 5,000 people. I can speak to 10 people. I often find that speaking to smaller groups is actually more beneficial. There's more engagement. When you're speaking to a large crowd, you're just speaking. You can't see anyone's faces. You can't see whether they're resonating with what you're saying or not. But smaller crowds, it's I think that it can actually be more powerful. You can look people in the eye. You can, but my ego doesn't get bruised by such things. I've had opportunity to speak on like Open Day. I think that's probably the largest crowd I've spoken to. It was like 10,000 student and parents. Yeah. I mean that was wild. I had such a rush afterwards. I think for like 2 days. I think if someone had tried to shoot me, the bullet would have just bounced off. Like I was just invincible.
It's actually so crazy, just like how paths cross. So Kwena was busy speaking. You were busy speaking as SRC President. I was sitting in the crowd, okay? My mom was sitting next to me. She misheard something. She leans forward to the woman in the row in front of her and asks, hey, what did they just say? Did they say this? They chat, okay? The kid sitting next to that woman gets introduced to me very hurriedly. His name was Quotas. Okay, we get introduced very quickly. A few days later, like the next week, I go into class for the first time. I don't know anyone. There's Quotas.
Yeah.
He's the only person I've ever met at the school. I call him over. Quotas. He comes over to me. We sit together. And Quotas and I, along with some other guys that we met over the next few days, started my first business. We started it together. And over the course of that year, I ran that business alongside those guys. Eventually, there was some conflict. They moved on to other things. I stayed. I kept running the business. I got involved in other projects, Entrepreneurs Network, got involved in stock trading when lockdown began, got involved in a bunch of different things. Letterboxes, another startup I used to work with. Leading me down paths, meeting people, eventually to this podcast. And here I am sitting with you now. And the catalyst event in my life that set me on this path happened halfway through your speech. And isn't that incredible to think about?
Yeah, no, hey, life.
And if you were just a little bit better at speaking, my mom would have heard you.
I was about to say the same thing, and then they wouldn't have been there. So clearly I was meant to stumble there.
What I would have done there. It's often, you think about this a lot, is like how small decisions and small situations led you down paths that you were on. And then you think about, well, what if things had been just a little bit, just a smidge different? So if Kwena hadn't hadn't said one sentence a little bit mumbly, or if my mom hadn't like not been paying attention at that moment, I'd never have met Quibus. Who knows if I would have started the business? You know, I don't know. Maybe something Quibus said gave me the idea. I can't remember.
So basically what you're saying is I deserve an equity stake.
This
inside,
podcast is yours now. It is what it is. No, it's incredible. And I mean, you can go back even further. Like, we were late that day, which is why we didn't go sit in the main hall. We went to go sit in some like side hall. So we had to listen to you on a screen. You know, maybe things would have been different if we'd been in the main hall. You know, I don't know.
No, that's why me and my dad have the conversation a lot. I genuinely believe that success is about 10 to 15% preparation, and 85 to 90%. There's my maths wrong there. 80.
Yeah, you were
to
on
85.
you were spot on. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Anyways, I'm just gonna say 80-20. It's a lot easier.
Yeah.
20% preparation, but then 80% luck. You know,
Luck.
because I look at my career as well. Literally, I woke up one day at a time that I never woke, like it was at like 5 or something like that, and there was this political event happening at 6 at the Groenkloof Nature Reserve, and I said, you know what, I'm awake, might as well go. Had no intention of going, went there. Solly, who then became the executive mayor, was there. Helen Zillow was there, and then maybe 2 or 3 other people that showed up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and so I got to spend the whole day with them. They liked me, you know, and that's how I ended up on the campaign team. That's how I built up a profile, eventually became president, became a councillor. But it's because I just happened to wake up, you know, maybe it was a mosquito, I don't know, you know, that was just like, and I woke up.
But you know, I don't even think you can call it luck, because I have to, like I have to believe that even if I wasn't sitting right behind Quibus, if I was sitting behind someone else, I have to believe that the person who I am, the industrious person who I try to be, would have still made something happen. You know, maybe not the same thing, but I have to feel like even though I would be in a very different life, at the very least I would still be in a good life that I enjoyed, and I still felt proud of my achievements, and still had a lot of projects going on. And I have to believe that even if you didn't wake up early that morning, at some point you would have found yourself at another crossroads and another opportunity to lead down the same path. Because if it's all just luck, then what are we even doing? You know?
No, that's why I said 20% preparation.
Yeah,
you must also be prepared when luck comes knocking on your door.
You've got to be ready to grab that opportunity. And also, if you miss an opportunity, don't feel shit about it. Like, there's so many opportunities. And people think, you know, that whole thing about when opportunity comes a knocking, you better go for it. Opportunity doesn't look like what you think it looks like. Opportunity looks like waking up really early in the morning. Opportunity looks like sitting behind the right people at a speech in orientation week. And, you know, opportunity looks like so many different things. So wherever you are now, if you're listening or if you're watching, the opportunity for you to change your life is it's in front of you right now. Like, go for it right now. It doesn't need to be, you know, this happens to be the day that X and Y just perfectly aligned, because more often than not, things don't perfectly align, you know? Why don't you just today, instead of going to the same coffee shop that you go to every single day, go to a different mall, drive a little bit further, you know? Go sit there and have lunch there. Or maybe tonight, instead of getting drunk with your mates, why don't you go onto Harvard's website? They have a bunch of free online courses that they do all the time. Why don't you just go watch the first lecture, and maybe if you like it, you know, you can do another one. Before you know it, this tiny little decision sets you on a path that you couldn't even have imagined you'd be on.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I also think, like, I've seen a lot, I think people often get trapped inside this idea of a plan to opportunity or a plan to success. You know, I've seen so many people that, like, they've got their 5-year plan, their 10-year plan, and I don't believe in that either. You know, it's, as you said, opportunity could be, you know, anything, literally anything. And if you get stuck like in this rigid idea of this is the path I'm going to take, it's never going to happen. You know, that if you're sticking to a plan, you're saying you're bigger than life, and no one's bigger than life.
I'm currently reading a book called The 100-Year Life. And the point of the book is for a person born in 1998, which is a year before I was born, there's a prediction according to the way that average lifespan has changed. If you keep following that trend, the average person in 1998 will live to be 100. Okay, on average.
I pray I don't live that long.
So you were born in what?
94.
94. So you will likely live to be at least 96, 97. And it's not linear. It's not like every year you're born later, you add a year.
Yeah.
It grows because of our advances and et cetera, et cetera. So the point of the book is to talk about preparing yourself for an immensely long life. And something that they said in the book, which I found really interesting, is that the opportunities people get that lead to careers and lead to career changes, lead to massive things, usually don't come from your friends. Those opportunities usually come from friends of friends, like acquaintances, people you've met a couple times. And the reason why is because your friends, as much as they love you and as much as you love them, they are heavily invested in you staying where you are.
That's
right?
deep, but so true.
Yeah, because, if you think about it, your friends don't want you to move away for a new job.
Yeah.
Your friends don't want you to start working more hours and not being able to see them. What your friends want is to be able to continue your friendship.
Yeah.
And if that's the most important thing in your life, then by all means, stay where you are and be the best friend you can be. But if you're a person who's really trying to make a name for yourself, the person you need to be having coffee with is not your best friend every day.
Yeah.
Just once a week, have coffee with that guy you met that one time. Just pick up the phone or send them a DM on Instagram. Like, for example, there's a guy called Martin who I admire so much. In fact, his son or daughter will be born within the next day or two.
Sure.
He's my age. So I met Martin at a party. He started a company called Bean Bike and Coffee Co. with his best mate, Adrian. And they are so successful. Like, I'm so proud of them. They've done such incredible things. But he was not my friend the first time I invited him to have a cup of coffee. I thought he was a really cool guy. At the time, he had a small business. I had a small business. I had his number from the party. So a couple of weeks later, I gave him a call and said, do you want to meet for a cup of coffee on campus? I then also invited a guy I once just walked past at Tux Novation, had a quick chat, got his number. His name is Targo. He was the founder of a small app development company. Suddenly, the three of us sat around a table, and I went, this is so much fun. What if we called this the Young Entrepreneurs Network? What if we started this and made it a thing? Like 2 years later now, Yen is a thing that I love. And there's a lot of different businesses represented there. And it's a big part of who I am now, is in engagement in student entrepreneurship. But if I had instead that morning just called up one of my mates who I had lunch with every day, I wouldn't have had that opportunity, you know? So what the book says about your friends wanting you to stay where you are, it's not because they don't like you. It's because they do. It's because they really like you and they want you in their lives as long as possible. But if you want to really advance in life, seeking out opportunities by talking to those people who you know, like everyone knows someone who can give them an opportunity. Like everyone knows a high performer, everyone knows someone exceptional. Go have lunch with that person, just bounce some ideas off. Even if you just go have lunch and ask them, so tell me about how you got where you are today, they'll give you some cool stories. People who are listening right now, we're coming up towards the end. Something I've always wanted to do is have lunch or have breakfast with a stranger. I thought that would be a really cool idea. So once campus opens again, this is probably my last year at university, but let's say second semester is on. Let's say second semester is on campus. If you're keen on having lunch with me sometime, just send me a DM on my personal Instagram page. We can have lunch on campus together sometime. Maybe one of us learned something that we didn't know beforehand.
I mean, that's how we started. It was just that Tribeca.
Yes,
if I'm not mistaken, wasn't I just sitting there alone eating?
Yes.
And then
I saw you. I saw you in the SRC building because I went there because that actress Simone Nordman, she wanted someone from Tux to help her to set up an event. She posted that on her Instagram story. I sent her a DM saying, I'm at Tux, I can help you. I know the people who will be able to help you. I went to the SRC office. You weren't president anymore. I went to the SRC office to go and find out who I can chat to. You were in the hallway. I said, hey, you are Kwena, right? And you were busy. Like, you did not want to talk to me. You were like, yeah, I'm Kwena. Good to meet you, whatever. And then I saw you again on a coffee shop a couple weeks later. And I think, did I not just invite you to come eat?
Yeah, no, I think that, there was
just,
3 of you at the table, and I was just chilling there eating alone. You said, why don't you bring your plate here? And I said, cool.
Yeah, Kwena put his plate down on my table, and now we're friends.
Yeah.
Yeesh, man. That's amazing.
Yeah, no, life is a beautiful thing.
Life is a beautiful thing. Yeah. But it makes you wonder, like, the path you are on is so ripe to change. You know, like, just something as small as me asking this guy I recognize from the SRC office who was sitting alone. You had the same breakfast every day.
Every single day.
I remember. I saw you sitting there alone 2 days in a row. And the second day I just said, hey, Kwena, you don't remember me. I met you at the office once. You want to, like, come sit at my table? And you came, sat, and here we are. Probably like 2 years later or so, doing a podcast in my place, you know? It's amazing.
Yeah, no, it really is.
Kwena, I always love talking to you, man.
Hey, no, we must do this again soon.
Such a good time. We've come up on 2 hours. I think we've surpassed 2 hours.
I've got this, 2 hours, 10 minutes.
2 hours, 10 minutes. Yeah, but I went to the bathroom before we started. It was already recording.
Fair.
All right. But it's been so awesome to have you on, man.
Yeah, no, and we must do it again soon.
Yes, we will. We'll do it again. Like, I had you on episode 3 or 4. Now it's episode 16, so I'll have you on again like episode 30 or something.
No, before then. We need to have a session specifically about the panel government.
Okay.
Where we really sit down and thrash out the panel government.
We can have other people on, other people who are, like, once I get a third mic, then we'll start doing 3-way podcasts. We'll have someone else. We'll have, like, David.
Yeah.
You, me, and David will break down the panel.
Yeah. No. That's next. I'm ready.
Awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to the Ground Floor podcast. My name is JC Steyn. Kwena, thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much.
Right. Have a great day. Cheers.